today are centering words from The Lorax by Dr. Seuss. "Mister," he said with a sawdusty sneeze, "I am the Lorax. I speak for the trees. I speak for the trees have no tongues. I'm asking you, sir, at the top of my lungs. Unless someone like you cares a whole awful lot, nothing's going to get better. It's not. I'm the Lorax who speaks for the trees, which you seem to be chopping as fast as you please." Let us spend some time in silent reflection on these words. We turn today to the scriptures and the Psalms, the ancient Hebrew wisdom literature, the first psalm. "Happy are those who do not follow the advice of the wicked, or take the path that sinners tread, or sit in the seat of scoffers. But their delight is in the law of the Lord, and on God's law they meditate day and night. They are like trees, planted by streams of water, which yield their fruit in its season, and their leaves do not wither. In all that they do, they prosper. The wicked are not so, but are like the chaff that the wind drives away. Therefore, the wicked will not stand in the judgment, nor sinners in the congregation of the righteous. For the Lord watches over the ways of the righteous, but the way of the wicked will perish." Today's psalm teaches us how to seek happiness. Has anyone ever read a book on how to do that? I recently read The Happiness Trap. I highly recommend it. It's a goal for most of us. This psalm also reminds us, however, to honor our partnership with God, our Creator. You see, the care of creation is up to us, and a responsibility that for some reason we need to be reminded of over and over. Then the psalmist tells us how to find delight in life. It is when we are being like the trees, planted by streams of water and yielding fruit, whose leaves do not wither. In all that they do, they prosper. Doesn't that sound glorious, to sit by a stream of water and just yield fruit and be prosperous? I think that sounds amazing. So the psalmist suggests, be more like the trees. Well, good, because I really love trees. You know, because first of all, they're great listeners. They don't talk back or interrupt when you're sharing your deepest, darkest secrets with them, and they're very loyal. Trees are always there where you leave them, and they won't run off to find a more interesting person to talk to. And they have really deep roots into their communities, and they are here to stay. Unless, as the Lorax reminds us, we just keep chopping them down. Did you have a favorite tree when you were a child? My tree was a place to run and hide when the grown-ups in my life were asking me to do something I didn't want to do. I also ran to my tree when they were upset with me for doing something, well, that I probably shouldn't have. And when the adults were upset with one another, I went to this tree when I just wanted to disappear. In the front yard of my childhood home back up in Dallas, there's this large live oak, and it had this really thick branch with a curve in it, like a saddle. And I would climb up there in that tree and sit in that saddle for hours. I would take books with me, and I would read to my live oak friend. And that tree always listen to me. To this day, trees capture my attention wherever I go. Don't we have those beautiful live oaks and pecans everywhere? And of course, we like to think everything is more beautiful and bigger in our great state. Like our enormous, wide open skies, or those piney woods in East Texas, the lakes and streams of our beloved hill country, the deserts of West Texas, that beautiful Gulf shoreline. Texas is a big, beautiful place, and it's such a perfect setting to be mindful of creation and our responsibility to it. So how are we doing? Well, it seems we have so much land and water and other natural resources that we've gotten a bit, behind the curve in our conservation efforts, in protecting our green spaces, or creating a master use plan for our water resources. And we've been just a tiny bit lazy because we had so much. I think it was hard to comprehend that we would run out of anything. But here we are today in a drought. Did you hear the electric company ask you to conserve resources? This week, our landfills are overflowing, and yes, we face air and water pollution here in this great state. Now, many of us can look back and think of a time when we thought we would always have an abundance of fresh air and water and open land, and we were wrong. And in our scripture today, the psalmist reminds us that the path to greater happiness and wisdom is this: not follow the advice of the wicked, or take the path that sinners have trod, or sit in the seat of scoffers. Try to say that 3 times quickly. Sit in the seat of scoffers. Now, I don't know about you, but I come from a long line of scoffers. There may be many people in my family and in yours that don't believe global warming is for real. They seem to see it as a political issue and not a humanitarian one. And some of you may know a scoffer or two yourself. This path that sinners tread is one that many of us have been on before ourselves. Many of us have been careless and rather calloused when it comes to taking care of our beautiful state. We have sinned against our land, if you will, and each other. Fortunately, we have started to take things more seriously, but we really don't like to be inconvenienced. I mean, don't ask a Texan to walk anywhere, for heaven's sakes. Don't ask us to consider using mass transit. Don't ask us to stop using electricity to cool our homes or churches, or to power our big cities, or even to consider recycling our green waste into compost. And for heaven's sakes, do not ask us to stop eating so much beef. Just don't ask. I think we all know we have a long way to go. But the good news is that many of us have started to listen. Many of us have changed our ways, and now are working very hard to ensure there will be clean air and fresh water and alternative sources of energy for generations to come. Do you remember our Vacation Bible School back in June? Their focus was on recycling, reusing, and repurposing. And I'm proud to say that many of our children come from homes where this is an actual practice. During that week, we learned ways to compost and to reduce our carbon footprints. We can now scan a QR code for our bulletins to get them electronically. And we have moved away from using styrofoam in our kitchen. Hallelujah. Inspired by our children, we have taken some action to improve. But as we all know, there's more that we can do, and with God's help, we can do it. Some of you may remember this famous story by Dr. Seuss, The Lorax. It was a groundbreaking book in 1971. It's 40 years old. And it had a really uncomfortable message. It was delivered by a character named the Lorax. And basically the message was this: we don't need to use as many resources as we think we do. In this book, the Lorax finds that all the truffula trees are being chopped down to make sneeds. He begins a journey to discover who is behind this environmental nightmare, and he meets the character called the Onceler, at once asking him to stop chopping down those beautiful trees. And thus the Lorax becomes a symbol of environmental justice campaigns, and a movie was released recently, 2012, based on this story. Much has been said about the Lorax and theology behind it, but here is a quote from Brett Love at Green Global Travel that sums it up pretty well. To understand the meaning of the Lorax story, you first need to understand that there is a war going on that started a long time ago. And I'm not referring to the armed conflicts, he says, currently raging throughout parts of the Middle East and Africa. This battle is raging all around the world, from the biodiverse Amazon River Basin to South Africa's Kruger National Park, from the polar ice caps in the Arctic to the lush rainforests of Indonesia. On one side of this war are people and corporations who would exploit Mother Nature's natural resources for their own profit. And on the other side are the indigenous people and wildlife that call these areas their home, who need the same resources for their very survival. End quote. So I wonder, what side do we find ourselves on most days? What side would the psalmist recommend? Where's our happiness? What I'm hearing the psalmist remind us to do is to heed the laws of the Lord and take better care of creation. The key to happiness is to take delight in God's world and be better stewards of our earth. And what I'm hearing from the Lorax is a dire warning that if each of us doesn't change something we are doing, there will be no more trees, no more fresh air, no more natural resources for us to share. What I'm hearing from the folks at Global Green Travel is that we are at war and need to decide who and what we want to fight for. The 2008 UCC National Youth Event, we had a speaker named Julia Butterfly Hill. She was one of my sheroes. You might remember her story. She lived in a 1,500-year-old redwood tree up in Northern California for 2 years. For 2 years, to prevent the Pacific Lumber Company from cutting it down. The tree was affectionately named Luna, and she wrote a book called The Legacy of Luna about her experience. She's, of course, known now as an environmental activist, and in her bio, she proudly proclaims that she is a vegan. When I heard her speak at the National Youth Event, the youth and I were very moved. One thing she said I will never forget. She asked all of us this question: when you throw something away, where is away? There is no away. We are literally throwing our garbage on the face of Mother Earth and asking her to deal with it. That statement really struck with us. As we move through our week at Vacation Bible School here at church, we remember that it is fine to recycle, but it's even better not to use things just once and throw them away. It's better to reuse and to repurpose or not use them at first anyway. You remember some of the lovely art creations from that week that were in the fellowship hall that the children had made from repurposed items? Our children will continue to inspire us to do better. The psalmist reminds us not to listen to the voice of the wicked, and that includes the voice inside of us that says, it's just one straw. It's just one tiny little plastic water bottle. I'm just going to drive down the street a little bit. Well, you know what your voices are saying. Our friends at Green Faith, a global interfaith environmental ministry, invite us to join them Friday, September 20th, in a global climate strike to demand urgent action by world leaders based on values of compassion, love, and justice for all of God's children. There will be a march here at the state capitol in Austin on that day, appropriately titled Fridays for Our Future, and inspired by the Youth Climate Strike movement. Join us at 10 a.m. as we stand on the Capitol steps and call for action. There are no cards in the back of the sanctuary there if you wish to write one of our elected representatives to remind them of our sacred responsibility to creation. We can all show that we care in one way or another. Let us heed the words of the Lorax. It's time for each and every one of us to do just a little something different, because after all, unless someone like you cares a whole awful lot, nothing is going to get better. It's not. Let us silently reflect.